And it's the final trading day for the week. Welcome to Friday edition of Business Incorporated. Here's what's coming your way in the next 55 minutes. In Nigeria, Channels Television had a special interview with the coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun. And still in Nigeria, generator owners can now test the authenticity of it. And then we'll go to Africa and we look at the digital consumer trends for the continent. Good afternoon. Welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa. We start from the global space now. From global oil, we see that the prices fell on Friday after United States federal officials said that interest rate cuts should be delayed at least 2 more months before indications of healthy demand and concerns over the supplies could boost prices in the coming days. Brent crude futures were down 38 cents, that's about 0.5% to $83.29 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were 40 cents down, that's 0.5% to $78.21. U.S. Federal Reserve policymakers should delay interest rate cuts by at least another couple of months to see if recent uptick in the inflation signals stalling progress towards price stability, or if it's just a bump in the road and higher interest rates for longer slows economic growth. And of course, we know that of course will affect the demand for oil. U.S. Central Bank has held its policy rate steady in the 5.25% and 5.5% range since last July. Minutes of its policy meeting last month shows most central bankers were worried about moving too quickly to ease policy. In the grain space, Chicago corn and soybean futures edged higher on Friday with bargain buying lifting prices after both markets dropped to their lowest levels in 3 years. Although plentiful supplies are likely to limit gains, wheat rose for a second session on supply concerns as potential U.S. sanctions against top global wheat exporter Russia could hit flows. Chicago corn and soybean futures edged higher on Friday with bargain buying lifting prices after both markets dropped to their lowest levels in 3 years. Although plentiful supplies are likely to limit gains, wheat rose for a second session on supply concerns as potential U.S. sanctions against top global wheat exporter Russia could hit flows. Corn added 0.4% to $4.20 for a quarter of a bushel, having gained almost 1% this week. Wheat, which is set for a weekly gain of 3.9%, was up 0.5% to $5.82 for a quarter of a bushel. Corn and soybean prices dropped to their lowest levels since late 2020 on Thursday. Expectations of higher corn and soybeans production in top South American producers Brazil and Argentina are weighing on Chicago futures. Argentina's corn and soybean crops continue to improve. That's because of recent rains. The Buenos Aires Grains Exchange has said that with more rainfall expected in the coming days after wet weather conditions, it could help curb damages from a heat wave last month. Argentina's Rosario Grains Exchange cut its estimate this week for the country's 2023-2024 soybean and corn harvest. While the 49.5 million metric tons of soy and 57 million metric tons of corn are still a huge improvement from the previous year. In the metal space, gold prices inched high on Friday and were on track for their first weekly rise in 3 as a broadly weaker U.S. dollar and growing tensions in the Middle East lifted bullion's appeal. Spot gold was up 0.1% at $2,025.07 per ounce and has gained 0.7% so far in the week. U.S. gold futures edged 0.2% higher to $2,035.03 per ounce. Federal policymakers should delay cuts by at least another couple of months to see if a recent uptick in inflation signals stalling progress toward price stability or if it's just a bump in the road. And then we come to Nigeria. Channels Television has had an exclusive interview with the coordinating minister of Nigeria's economy, and he spoke on a whole lot of things. But just for now, we'll tell you the stance of the federal government on subsidy removal. There's been questions if subsidy is indeed back on petrol, while the government is also toying with the idea of removing subsidy on electricity. Well, let's listen to the minister, and then we'll tell you where to get more of this.
Fuel subsidy. Yes, we are very much aware that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu removed fuel subsidy in his inaugural address. Immediately, he was elected President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And the commitment remains to do away with the payment and expenditure that was both wasteful and added little value to the economy as a whole, and yet enriched a few people. Only 3% of the subsidy benefit reached the bottom 40% of the population is a calculation that has been made. However, given the way the exchange rate has moved, and given the depreciation in that exchange rate, there does, and there has remained, there is and there has remained a little subsidy element. And that is because apart from any other reason, in an environment of exchange rate volatility, you cannot be changing fuel prices, cannot be moving fuel prices every other day. So what is being worked on is a framework and a sort of template that will allow for the establishment of a fuel price that is not going to be moving every day with the vagaries of the foreign exchange market. That is a work in progress, and what it is most important to emphasize is that at the levels at which this fuel subsidy came in or was inherited when the administration came in, it was unsustainable. It was leading to not just federal government expenditure that was unsustainable, but it was also weakening and threatening the viability of NNPC, the National Oil Corporation. And therefore, it had to be done away with, and the commitment is to continue to make every effort to minimize and eradicate that inefficient fuel subsidy.
So you can get the full interview with the minister, the coordinating minister of Nigeria, on our YouTube channel. Just subscribe to channelstv.com/channelsweb. That's our YouTube channel. Subscribe, and then you can watch the full interview in a couple of about an hour or so. We'll have that full interview right there. So please do join us there and get the full one. Now, during Business Morning earlier today, we did talk about some opportunities of funding and investment, especially attracting foreign investment into the real estate sector. Well, now let's talk about what's available domestic. That's about real estate funding right here in Nigeria. And we have joining us to discuss this from our Abuja studio, the Managing Director of Shelter of Freak Development Fund, Mr. Theono Habib Han. Mr. Han, good afternoon, and thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so we know
Thank
that...
you for having me.
Great. So we know that talking about Shelter of Freak, Nigeria's government is also part owners of Dates, Nigeria's total paid up capital subscription to Shelter of Freak is about 30.7 million. The Nigerian committed to do 29.3 million subscription. Where are we with that? Talking about the engagement or commitment of the federal government of Nigeria, and what does it make available to Nigerians?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and pleasure to be here today in Nigeria. This is part of our one-week mission to really engage with the government of Nigeria, which is one of our largest shareholders, with 15% of Shelter Afrique Development Bank, formerly known as Shelter Afrique, because we underwent a major transformation of the institution since I came on board a year ago. We have a whole new set of statutes that have been reforming the institution from the ground up, and Nigeria has been really at the forefront of this transformation with the Honorable Minister of Housing and Urban Development, Architect Dangiwa, who has been and still is the chair of the Shareholders Bureau of Shelter Afrique Development Bank. In October in Algeria, we were able to transform the institution into a development bank to make sure that we achieve the targets of affordable housing across the continent. So Nigeria has historically been one of the largest shareholders, as I explained, and today with the engagement with the Minister of Housing, Minister of Finance, the Central Bank Governor, all the way to His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, there is a commitment to increase the participation of Nigeria into Shelter Afrique's Development Bank shareholding, and we're looking forward to conclude that.
So what does Nigeria's ownership in Shelter Afrique, what opportunities does it open up to Nigeria and Nigerians?
So the opportunities are tremendous. Shelter Afrique Development Bank works across the value chain of affordable housing. So we tackle issues related to land development, land ownership, all the way to the construction, materials, financing, and also financing developers and financing the mortgages. So we are working across the value chain in Nigeria, working with the private sector, the public sector, to really drive access to affordable housing in Nigeria. For instance, Shelter Afrique Development Bank has issued in the past 2 years 46 billion nairas in the capital markets in local currency to fund the housing development and mortgages in Nigeria. And this is part of our 200 billion naira program, which is a medium-term note MTN program to finance affordable housing. So Shelter Afrique is fully involved in the spectrum of the development finance institutions in Nigeria, and we'll be doing more of that. So the goal for us is to facilitate access to decent, affordable, and sustainable housing for the population.
So when you say affordable housing, I mean, that word really catches a lot of attention, but are there ways that individual Nigerians can access this, or do they have to go through government institutions?
So there are several ways to benefit from Shelter Afrique Development Bank. So as I said, it's through the private sector, either financial institutions that we fund, and the financial institutions would finance either developers to build affordable housing or mortgages through individuals and households to finance the acquisition of the homes. And then we also finance developers directly so that developers can build those homes in a manner that's affordable and accessible to the masses. And we work with government agencies and the government itself through PPPs, public-private partnership, where the government and the agencies or the states provide access to land, affordable land, and we, Shelter Afrique, will structure the PPP in such a way that we can mobilize developers that can deliver large-scale affordable housing, but also we mobilize the funding to finance those initiatives. So all in all, we are really a wholesale development finance institution that makes it enable the sector really to address the housing crisis, and the final beneficiaries obviously are the Nigerian populations.
Yeah, we know affordable is an interesting word because I know it means different things to different people. But at a time when, I mean, we've been talking about the cost of cement in Nigeria, as well as other building materials, how do you then get affordable homes? Or I guess it would be, how do you define affordable homes to Nigerians who are in different levels of economic status?
That's an excellent question. Affordability is a very relative term. Depending on the market where we operate, there are different levels of affordability. And obviously, affordability is it depends on different inputs, right? So we have to look at the cost of the home that's being built, the cost of construction materials, and then the cost of financing, and the level of income of the populations. And we put all that together and we come up with an affordability index. And Shelter Afrique Development Bank has actually designed this affordability index to be consistent across the markets where we operate. And this allows us to define what affordability means depending on the market where we operate. So you are absolutely right. Affordability is a relative term, and we need to really make sure that it's customized to the market where we operate. And this is exactly why we have this affordability index calculation at Shelter Afrique Development Bank, which drives really the way we operate in the different markets. Because our objective is to really address the masses, the population that doesn't have access to financing, access to those decent homes, to make housing really a democratic sort of consumer goods, and make sure that actually everybody can get access to decent and affordable homes across the continent.
Yeah, well, finally, just before we let you go, I mean, you talked about democratic, you talk about everybody, and back here in Nigeria, we look at the rural areas as where you don't really have the purchasing power. Is there any funding that is intentionally channeled towards housing in the rural areas?
Absolutely. Shelter Afrique Development Bank is not only looking at the urban areas, so we really have to tackle the issue of urban versus rural. And definitely we are also in discussions with the government here in Nigeria and in our other 43 countries where we operate. We have 44 shareholders, 44 countries that are shareholders and members of Shelter Afrique, also African Development Bank and Africa Re. And here in Nigeria specifically, we've been in discussion with the government this week. We met the Vice President, Honorable Vice President of the Republic, of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who's been very supportive with the Pulako Resettlement Initiative in the northern part of Nigeria, in different rural areas, where Shelter Afrique Development Bank will also collaborate. And this is a very welcome initiative from His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Nigeria. And we, as Shelter Afrique, will be accompanying the government. We're part of the steering committee, by the way, in the Vice President's office, to really drive this agenda. So rural is really key to address the crisis of housing across the continent. It's not only about urban. So we have to make sure that individuals can be attracted to stay in the rural areas. And this will be in conjunction with the other priorities of the government, developing the agricultural sector and making sure that people get a decent life in the rural areas, so that we can reduce the pressure on the cities. So it's part of our integrated approach to address the housing crisis across the continent.
Thank you so much. We do wish you the best and more homes, more affordable homes, I should add, in Nigeria and across the continent. Mr. Fenu Habibhan, the Managing Director of Shelter Afrique Development Bank, for your time.
Thank you so much, and appreciate. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Welcome. All right, let's go back home now. The United Kingdom continues its drive to connect Nigeria and UK markets. This time, its approach is bringing 9 known businesses into the country so that the representatives can observe the trade environment, consumers' taste, and connect directly with officials of the Department of Business and Trade Missions from the United Kingdom have created a platform for exhibition for invited businesses, also an opportunity for Nigerian businesses and consumers to explore and partner.
So what was meant to be an explorer mission has now turned out to be a proper trade mission where people are building partnerships, people are finding distributors. So it has been very, very positive. The economic realities in Nigeria are not has not changed because of this mission, but then definitely we can see that there's a keen interest. And as I said, I'm with the Department for Business and Trade, and what my department does is facilitate trade between the UK and Nigeria. So for us, this is a welcome establishment. If we can trade, if you can move goods from Nigeria to the UK and you can move goods from the UK to Nigeria, then definitely the economy would become better. In terms of foreign investment, with this particular delegation, definitely we see the possibility of investment from the UK into Nigeria. So take, for instance, for the likes of the retailer like Cartel Watches that are thinking of setting up shop in country. They want to come in country. They want to be able to. That's you putting money into the country, right? We have a brand that is not here today on this mission, but it's a brand that is popular. It's called The Body Shop, and we're working on a partnership. And they're also thinking of coming and setting up shop in Lagos and Abuja. So it's all very positive.
All positive. But another thing is power. Standards Organization of Nigeria has inaugurated laboratories to test generators and power transformers that are sold into the Nigerian market. The Director General of SON, Dr. Ifeanyi Okeke, met with traders and manufacturers in Lagos, says that with the new device, all information supplied on generators and transformers will be verified and tested for compliance with Nigeria's industrial standards. Mobile laboratory to test generators in Nigeria has become even more necessary with the deepening reliance on the alternative source of electricity for both homes and businesses. The laboratory will also test transformers.
Consumers on their own can test products, the quality of products, at the point they are purchasing it, or even when it is installed in their premise. What they need to do is to call on someone who will, because this is a mobile device that can be taken to that point for testing. In the past, we have had issues of heavy equipment like generators and transformers, whereby they said people that are assembling it and manufacturing it, it takes time to move it from the point of production or production premise to sun. This time around, we're bringing these things to the assemblers, taking it to the manufacturers, and even to the ports. So if you are bringing in equipment, we can at the port be able to ascertain the quality of that product.
Standards Organization of Nigeria brings this message to the traders and manufacturers of electrical products.
So when there is a quality product, the consumers will be satisfied, because there is no way you will come to either Alaba or anywhere they are selling electrical product and buy. When you are buying and you heard that is so satisfied, you will be going home happy.
So it's a way to say consumers get ISO certified products. In man, our motto, miscellaneous slash vehicle assemblers are already gearing up. We also have a subsector that takes care of these generators and the transformers and this thing.
It's obvious that consumers are the core of this innovation. However, it will not make any impact if the customers of electronic products do not make requests at the point of purchase. And energy transition is at the top of conversations with the NESG as stakeholders' engagement towards successful Nigeria energy transition. A summit was organized by the NESG and the African Climate Foundation. The meeting calls attention to the role of the private sector in the carbon market as the world moves towards green energy sources. However, the private sector has challenges which deter an accelerated move to embrace the needed change.
In my group. So the women are there. We don't want to hear.
The core message is that the private sector has a significant role to play in climate action in Nigeria, more so than even the public sector. While the public sector is important in setting the targets and the commitments, nothing can be achieved without active involvement of private sector players.
One of the things that we've seen are the challenges that the private sector are facing. We've seen, they've mentioned a whole lot in terms of capacity deficiency. So what it implies that there is need for us to develop tailor-made programs that can support them in understanding the landscape so that they can play their role as the players in the sectors.
Yes, well, a lot of things going on in Nigeria. Now, let's talk about that news that we had yesterday, which is the GDP of the country. We saw for the fourth quarter of 2024, Nigeria's GDP was up to 3.46% for the fourth quarter, and that, of course, according to the NBS, they released that number yesterday. This was lower than the 3.52% in the same quarter of 2022, but higher than the 2.54% recorded in the third quarter of 2023. Well, the NBS says that growth rate was mainly driven by services sector, which recorded 3.98% and contributed 56.55% to the aggregate GDP. Let's delve into this and other burning economic issues with Mr. Femi Onokare. He is the Managing Director of Nosa Nanke Solutions Limited, and he joins us in the studio. Mr. Nanke, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you. We saw the numbers yesterday, the GDP number for fourth quarter. Was it better than you expected, or was it just as you expected?
In all sincerity, it's actually better than was expected. What many had projected and some of the doom and gloom we've had in the public space, one would have expected that the GDP was tanking. And it is also significant to note that the biggest contributor was the non-oil sector, primarily services. Now, that should give us hope because we also have a teeming population, right, mostly youth, that can be harnessed to improve our service sector in terms of efficiency. We saw a case in terms of India, for example, where you have outsourcing of services to their. We have that opportunity as well on this part, and we can actually scale up. So it creates a nice opportunity for us to explore as a country. But the GDP position, month on month particularly quarter on quarter was particularly interesting because the plunge that was, as of Q3 compared to what happened in Q4 was very encouraging. And it shows that, some of the policies that were in place are actually reaping dividends along the line.
So you don't think perhaps it's the activities of the end of the year that contributed to this, so we don't get our hopes high?
Okay, so if it were just the festivities, right, one would have to compare it objectively with previous position, which was in Q3 and in Q2, where a lot of people were saying that there's no money in circulation.
Because, compared to the last quarter of 2022, it was lower.
Yes, it was lower. And remember, for 2022, we were coming from a period that we were having, in fact, the projection for this year was actually a lot higher than, we expect because of the performance in 2022. But the economic situation right now compared to then is a lot more dire, a lot of uncertainty within the system. So to have actually performed, the margin is not so big as one would have, going by public speculation. So I think it's encouraging. It's something that we can build on, and we have identified key sectors and areas that we can leverage and improve our overall performances as a country in, without, too much exposure to, oil receipts.
Yeah, so we saw that the service sector was the driver, but I don't hear a lot of us talk about the potentials in the service sector in this country.
It's really sad, and I think it harks back to what I like to call PTSD from the previous period of military regime and how we've been so dependent that it seems like everything in the country is built around oil. agriculture has always been one of the biggest contributors of GDP for the country over a long time, but we didn't leverage it, we didn't preach about it, we didn't speak on it, we didn't build on that. Well, we should be in a position that we should be net exporters of several, cash crops and products all over the world, but we have not built on those things. Now, in the report, it's highlighted that some of the services that provided the gap, the growth that we saw, were things that people don't pay too much attention to. The banking sector, telecommunications, these things are thriving. Even with all this, the country is bad, people are still buying, recharge cards. People are online trying to do one or two things, communicating. So we have a thriving economy underneath. It's just how to harness it in proper perspective to deliver the prospects that we
now, the first quarter is almost over. Okay, no, yes. Not almost over. The second month is almost over. I guess I'm ahead of myself. But, going by what we have been experiencing in 2024, all the high cost of living that has been expressed in protests and talks and all of that, what do you see for the first quarter of 2024? Where do you see the GDP?
So what's interesting about that is the GDP position is still expected to marginally improve. And the reason is the core indices, the core sectors that drove it before, they're not going down. It's not as if they're reducing. So, for example, the telecoms and financial services are not going to reduce in terms of value and contribution.
You don't think that the squeeze on purchasing power is going to reduce demand?
So that is also another thing we need to understand. Like our inflation is a bit artificial. Let me give you an example. So because of our lack of units in our naira, that is the spending, we create artificial inflation that does not reflect the true state of the economy. So if something increases by a margin of, say, 1 naira, so it was like 50 naira before, it's now selling for should be selling for 51 naira, 51 naira, 50 naira, 50 kobo. Because the currency units are being pretty much bastardized, it jumps from 50 kobo or 51 naira to 55 naira. Now that's a massive increase in terms of price differential, but that is not due to the embedded reason for the change in cost. That difference is lost in translation. It's just there, it's arbitrary. It's not accounted for by any laws of economy, just speculative. And that's because we have not managed the units of our currency a lot better in terms of purchasing power. Because in a country like America, you get rebates for, you see things like 199, 99.9. It encourages that, and it increases the strength of your local currency to actually affect purchases. So you can actually access more because the fragments, right, actually make more sense. The fractions within your currency actually make more sense and have more power. That would really ease it out for me in terms of purchasing, power. When people say, oh, our purchasing power is low, yes, there's an issue, but some of it are really artificial. You see, resale, what's it called? Panic. So someone buys something at 100 naira in the morning, he hears that, oh, they're selling it at 200 naira, and it increases his price to 300 naira. No reason in between. He was going to make a profit before. Now he's making double the profit, but he thinks that he has helped himself and edged himself. However, he has shifted everyone's margin, right, and everyone's ability to purchase that product by factors of, 50%, 100%, 200%. It's kind of suicidal. It's counterintuitive.
So you're saying we're hurting ourselves more like kids?
A lot of times. We agree that there are policy changes that are needed. We agree that the economy needs to be straightened out. A lot of things have been allowed to go on over time that really shouldn't, they are inimical to the progress of any country. We're talking about corruption, at different levels of government. We had subsidy regime for a crazy period of time. FX
we had or we
terrible. Okay, so we got
big question, but I think
we can get into that, right? Because some of the technicalities, and I also understand why the NNPC is not talking about it, because everything has become a bit of a political circus for us in the country, even people who are not directly involved in politics. And so it's easy to politicize issues and move sight away from what is really causing the stuff. And if you don't know what the problem is, you go to a doctor. If you misdiagnose a problem, the patient is likely to suffer more right?
Because the wrong
because of the wrong, yes,
medication and
that's
all
the
of
issue.
that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Managing Director of those Nanke Solutions Limited, Mr. Femi Onokaran, for your time this afternoon.
A pleasure to be here.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll head to the markets and then we head outside Nigeria to stay with us on Business Incorporated. Welcome back. Still watching Business Incorporated right here on Channels Television. Don't forget that exclusive interview we had with the Coordinating Minister of Nigeria, Mr. Wale Edun. You can get on our website, our YouTube channel. So subscribe and watch and hear all he has to say. Tell you, he said a lot of interesting things about the FX, about subsidy, and a lot of things you want to know. So just subscribe to our YouTube channel, Channels Television, and then you can watch. Now let's head to the market, see how that's doing intraday. The NGX has recovered slightly, 0.02%. If we could have that number right there. And for South Africa, it's in the negative 0.17%. In the negative, EJX is positive, however, 0.08%. So our Kenya closed yesterday positive, but still not recovered. That's its 100 index points, still at 92.65%. That's Thursday's number close right there. For the Middle East, we see Abu Dhabi is in the negative 0.35%. There you have it in the red at 9,282.65. Dubai is also negative. These are the only two markets that trade on Friday in that region at 0.49%. Unfortunately, they're in the red, 4,209.34. The other markets don't trade on Fridays. That's Saudi Arabia and Qatar. But we see that Saudi Arabia closed in the positive 0.22%, while it was a negative for Qatar, 10,303.24. We head to the United States. Now, stock futures hovered around flat on Friday. That's for the futures, because of the time difference. After the S&P 500 and NASDAQ Composite posted their best day since early 2023. But the Dow Jones is down marginally, very marginal for the futures, at 0.01%, 39,120. S&P 500 is also marginally down, as well as NASDAQ at 18,017.25, down 0.17%. Well, during the regular session, the major averages roared in a rally that was powered by NVIDIA. NVIDIA was a market mover, major one for this week, at least 3 days in the week. The chipmaker soared, catching a tailwind from winning quarterly results. The S&P added also for the week. So we'll know their closing numbers yet, because as we speak, they're just about opening the bells. We move to Asia to see how that market has closed. Asia Pacific market were mostly higher on Friday, with China stocks. Nikkei hit 39,000 yesterday and sustaining that 39,098.68 after gaining more than 2%. A nice way to end the week, I could say. Kospi is also up 0.13%, 2,667.70. The Hang Seng is on the flip side, down 0.1%, 16,725.86. If we see other markets right there, the Shanghai is green, 0.55%. In Australia, it's also green, 0.43%. Japan stocks were closed for trading today for the Emperor birthday holiday. Japan's market led gains in the previous session with the Nikkei obviously surpassing the previous record, 38,000, while China CSI added 0.86% to close at 3,486.67. Let's head to Europe now, where Eurozone business activity fell for the 9th month in a row. Recession knocking on the door right there. But the rate of decline eased further from January. We have Ekrem now joining us from Deutsche Welle to give us the details. Hi, Ekrem. Not a very good one, I see, from Europe. But what are the details of this drop?
Thanks for having me, Ini. The Purchasing Managers' Index, or PMI figures by the Hamburg Commercial Bank, shows that the downturn in Eurozone business activity eased in February. This is seen as a sign of recovery since the dominant services sector broke a 6-month streak of contraction and offset a deterioration in manufacturing. Economists say February PMIs show that the Eurozone may be on a slow path toward recovery. But they warn that while this is encouraging, the European economy would still struggle to gain traction this year. However, the downturn in Germany, Europe's largest economy, deepened this month as a slight improvement in services activity was unable to compensate for a surprisingly sharp deterioration in manufacturing.
And what's the mood in the manufacturing sector?
Today, the European stocks is expected to trade higher, Ini. The AI darling NVIDIA's stunning results sparked a wave of record highs from Asia to Europe and the United States. NVIDIA shares surged 16.4% overnight. That surge adds a record $277 billion in market value. The company's results supercharged a global AI-led rally in technology stocks. That surge brought NVIDIA's gains to $740 billion. This also means that NVIDIA has leapfrogged Amazon and Google parent Alphabet to become the third most valuable US-listed company after Microsoft and Apple. The only relatively negative note in NVIDIA's earnings report was that the company said its data center revenue from China dropped significantly due to the US export controls imposed in October.
Ekrem, thank you so much for that. We'll do it again next week. All right, in South Africa, the National Treasury is pumping 61.4 billion rands over the medium term to help alleviate the country's growing unemployment crisis. Finance Minister said it has also allocated 7.4 billion for the Presidential Employment Initiative to help South Africans back to work and grow the economy. The allocation is set aside for the initiative of 2024-2025 by reprioritizing funding from the Unemployment Insurance Fund's Labour Activation Program.
South African entrepreneurs seeking financing to kickstart or grow their ventures often find themselves facing closed doors from banks and venture capital firms. I had a chat with the Minister of Small Business Development here in South Africa, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, and I asked her, why are business creditors not fully supportive and skeptical about funding small and medium enterprises? And what is her department doing to help small businesses? And this is what she had to say.
To deal with the issue of access to finance. For example, our own government here in South Africa took a conscious decision that business must be given to women 40% of it. That's by government now, to say all of us on our procurement policies, we should strive to ensure that we meet the 40%. And the president has been vocal on that, and we are held accountable when we don't meet those targets. The second issue is that, for example, from our side, as the department responsible for development of small businesses, that must also make sure that it provides this financing through the DFI called CIFA.
Some commentators feel that banks are falling short in making funding accessible to small businesses.
In the context of the capitalist economy, where the banks actually are in charge, the current democracy in the world is managed and manipulated by the banks. And the banks manage every system in their favor, in their interest. The banks are there to make money. You would have seen that even amidst the COVID pandemic, the banks continue to make a lot of money, and they actually continue to pay obscene bonuses to the senior managers. So the banks are out there to make money.
I would say there's still a long way to go. I wouldn't say the battle is far from over, but there's still a long way that we need to go. But at the center of this route that we have to take is a closer collaboration between women-owned businesses and the ecosystem they are operating in.
Government says business owners need to prepare for any eventuality, keeping budgets lean, innovate, adopt emerging technology, and prioritize adaptability. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Thank you, Innocent. Well, let's take a trip around the continent now and look at some of those trending websites and what it tells us about the digital taste of consumers on the continent and perhaps what to expect. Right there in Nigeria, we see the top most visited websites to be Google, YouTube, X videos, Nikirim.com, and Facebook. When we head to Ghana, neighboring Ghana, it's almost the same thing, only that WhatsApp comes to number 5. And then we go to Kenya, and Kenya has almost the same thing, except that Kenya now introduces Gojara.to. That's for Kenya as the third country. What does this tell us about the digital taste of Africans, looking at these 3 big countries? What trends have been observed? Let's discuss this with Mark Kaigwa. He's the founder and chief executive officer of Nendo. Joins us from Nairobi. Hi, Mark. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Really happy to be here.
Good to have you here. So, I mean, we're Africans, so it's expected that it will be a common trend, you know, for major economies and the people on the continent. But what does it tell us about the consumption trend and expectation for 2024?
Well, Ini, I think for us at Nendo, the type of work that we do is research all over the continent. So Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and other countries too, and we do marketing campaigns as well. So you need to know about the behavior, in this case of Nigerians, when they do get online. So to give an example, part of what we say is that there are 5 things that we can expect if you give a Nigerian 100 megabytes, not very much, or 100 gigabytes. For some people, that is well over 1 month's data. And these are things, like you showed, like visiting search engines, particularly Google, thanks to Android, and thanks to what's happening with Google.com as a search engine. And then we have, secondly after that, sport. So something that Nigerians love. We saw the Super Eagles and how they really made the whole continent proud by going all the way to the last dance, as they call it. And while it might not have gone their way, they're a global powerhouse of sport. So Nigerians love not just sport, but football. And not just football, but local football in Nigeria and the English Premier League specifically. So there's a lot in that, including sports betting. That means that of every 100 megabytes that Nigerians have, a proportion of it is going to sports highlights on YouTube, and sports-related websites. And this is similar also in Kenya, certainly in Ghana as well. And then, as you've shown on the websites, we cannot hide away from adult websites. They tend to be there too. Again, responsibly enjoy the adult entertainment or pleasure. It's a very matter of fact in a way that people take their phones and devices and use them. Interestingly, I'd say TikTok for social, so social media rising up as well. And lastly, I would say there's stories. So Nigerians are enjoying consuming content. In some cases, what's interesting is that illegal streaming websites are there. And what that says to the global powerhouses is, are you giving Nigerians the way to pay for their content easily, quickly, affordably, and allowing them to be served in that way? So there's so much happening online, but we're excited to talk and explore what this means for Nigeria, Kenya, and the rest of the continent.
Yeah, exactly what we want to know. What does it tell us about the economic factors, maybe or consumption and decisions of individuals in these countries?
Yes, I think economically, social media, for instance, if we look there, it's presenting an outlet. It's presenting a place to vent, to discuss matters of national importance and matters of personal importance. Sometimes Nigerians may observe what we call a phenomenon, right? In my life, on my commute to work, or in my pursuit of a job, or when I visit the supermarket or shop aisle, and they're going online to places like TikTok to chronicle that, or they're going to places like Twitter to vent, to basically express themselves. And sometimes they're finding and building online community in a way that allows them to discuss not just the economy, but certainly life as it is, whether it's in Lagos or Abuja, really, north as well, kind of. You can find actually with the data that we've seen and geographically isolate and say, well, what are Nigerians in Lagos speaking of? What are the top musicians they listen to, etc.? And like you said, the economy tends to be a big recurring topic.
And we see some people are taking advantage of that to make some revenue.
That's right. I think one of the interesting things is the what we call now the creator economy. And in my view, Nigeria has always been, as a Kenyan who is active and seeking to do more business in Nigeria and other parts of the continent, Nigeria has found a window of just personal talent, culture, and this comes off of, I would say, Nollywood in particular, and certainly Nigerian music broadly in all genres, flavors, and so on. And so that creates a continental opportunity for comedians online, people who are just starting out and saying, look, the economic engine for me might not be through, a white collar job in an office, right? It might be through me and my smartphone, and I'll just build from here and go up. It could be through YouTube or Twitter, for instance, or Instagram. And so that's one of the exciting things for us is looking at online culture. You discover, like you're saying, that people aren't just playing around with their megabytes and their phones, but they're achieving some connections with Nigerian brands and even international comedy or entertainment careers armed and equipped with just a phone and an internet connection.
All right, thank you so much. An interesting conversation, which we have to continue another day because time is upon us. Thank you so much, Mark Kegwa, founder and chief executive officer of Nendo. It's time to do a bit of crypto just before we run out of here. And I know that by now you would have been seeing the stories and the news that Binance and OctaFX and others have been blocked. We hope to speak with Solomon Amunde together, but it's a sea of red for the crypto board. As we see, Bitcoin has lost at 52,000, dropped 1.63% to $51,093.74. Ethereum has followed. It was holding up for a bit, but you see Ethereum has lost more than 2%, 2.67%. BNB down, XRP down. What a Friday. We're going back to the traditional where we used to have a Red Friday, a bloody one. Doge, they're all down. Let's see if we can see the extreme greed is still the sentiment in the market in spite of that. If we can see the prices and see if we can do that. Yeah, there you go. Cardano is also down. And XRP, what a market on a Friday. But I guess the hottest topic around the crypto space at this time is that issue with Binance. Well, we spoke to our analyst yesterday, somebody who obviously trades, and he said, well, even the Binance was Nigerians or traders in Nigeria couldn't access it for a bit. But we did see a statement later on that has been unblocked. So perhaps by Monday, unfortunately, we were not able to get Solomon Amunde, who was supposed to speak with us on that. By Monday, we'll be able to see the update on that and have a better conversation. But that's it for Business Incorporated. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Don't forget the full conversation with the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of Nigeria, Mr. Waledu, is on our YouTube channel, Channels TV. You want to get the full details of it. You don't want to be told what he said. So join us then. Ladi Williams will be back here at 7 p.m. tomorrow for Capital Market, a summary of all the market, the auctions and the rise and fall at the NGX. You'll get that 7 p.m. Capital Market. So do join him then. I'll see you on Monday by God's grace. I hope to have a restful weekend. I wish you the same. Bye-bye.